Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani, along with Mark Austrian or Grant Turner. We are weighing in. Our podcast is brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Sort of a quiet weekend. Southern Plains happened, a couple other regionals, but nothing nationally. But big event coming up this weekend with Poland. Let's start, though, with the Hall of Fame. I'm going to do a share screen here, and we can talk about so this is the Hall of Fame. I went down Friday, saw Gary Abbott, who has been a mentor of mine in the media part of things. It was Bruce Burnett, Gary Abbott, Gary Chop, Tim Shields, Bill Zadig, Mark Lieberman, Carl Eschenbach, Jamil Byers. Loaded class. They did a little differently this year, where the first part of it, each person had an hour. And there was 4 people on Friday, 4 people on Saturday. Gary was the first guy on Friday. Gary's a huge champion of the sport, probably one of the biggest supporters of women's wrestling the sport has had, and did it before it was a cool thing to do. Had a lot to do with the machinations of saving Olympic wrestling. And going to Stillwater is always a fun weekend. Ran into Mike Zadig, got to hang out with Chris Perry, Esposito, Tyler Caldwell, Zoe, Taylor Gregorio, who was Taylor Miller, and her husband, who's a super nice guy and getting heavily indoctrinated into the world of wrestling. So I just want to say congrats to all these guys. Obviously an awesome class. Mark Lieberman was a guy that wrestled at Lehigh. My dad talked about him a lot when I was growing up. Tim Shields is the director of officials, and I'm pretty sure he's warned me, probably warned all 3 of us at one point or another in our careers. So we probably had it coming. And more than one person that I really respect has said Bruce Burnett is an absolute genius in the sport of wrestling. So, Mark, when you look at that class, what kind of sticks out to you?
Yeah, I know Gary, obviously, big in USA Wrestling. Kudos to him. Great honor for him. Tim Shields, I remember officiating back when I was coaching. So congratulations to him. And I think I know Tim best by the controversy we had at the national tournament this year when we had the clock not run and somebody went out of bounds and time should have been up, and he said we don't have anything set for it, so we had to wrestle it over. So but yeah, it's a great class. Obviously I know Zadig, being an Iowa grad and now being the head coach of the USA Wrestling for men's freestyle. So pretty impressive class.
What are your thoughts, GT, when you look at these 8 studs in tuxedos?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, like Bruce Burnett is, one of Bill Zadig's mentors and current, USA Wrestling head coach for men's freestyle. And Bruce really has been a driving force in men's freestyle for a very long time. So it's very cool to see him be honored. Gary Abbott is the godfather of all media. I've heard amazing stories about Gary's intellect and how passionate he is about his job, and just that he's been able to, potentially, he helped basically write the recommendations to keep wrestling in the Olympics. And if without Gary's intellect and, basically his knowledge of the sport, we might not have been able to keep wrestling in the Olympics. So, I mean, I don't think that story has made it out there much, but Gary is, he's a force within that world. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with any of these guys. These guys are amazing, very well-deserved positions, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if for folks that haven't been to the Wrestling Hall of Fame, it's in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It is literally right next to Gallagher-Iba Arena. Like, they almost share a parking lot. The parking lots touch each other. They're obviously on the same side of the street. You're right down the road from Eskimo Joe's. So it's sort of 3 just iconic places all there. So if you get a chance to go, like if you're going to junior duels, you should make try if you can make the turn off there. Perry, Oklahoma is near there too. A lot of people are talking about, though, just being able, I saw a couple of people looking at the monument, on the drive down. So congrats to all these guys. And it was the social distancing thing was interesting, but just walking through the Hall of Fame really sort of makes me feel small in the world of wrestling when you see what some of these people have done, and makes you feel really grateful for our sport and all the lessons that it teaches. I saw Gabe Dean put a quote out that, we're worried too much on everybody winning and losing right away instead of learning the lessons from wrestling. And, we're all different ages, but I think we all love wrestling for what it taught us and what the losses taught us, both as coaches and as athletes. So next thing, really cool story. Adam Kuhn, world silver medalist, multiple time All-American, everything coming out of high school, wanted to be an astronaut, got too big, hasn't played football since high school, and got signed to a free agent contract by the Tennessee Titans. Every year we talk about the NFL draft, somebody's posting like how many guys also wrestled in high school, like a Tristan Wirfs a year ago, and now he's a Super Bowl champion, first-round draft pick for the Buccaneers, got to protect Tom Brady's blind side. That's a pretty cool job to take on when you're 22, 23 years old. GT, I'll let you go first here. When you think about Kuhn to the Titans, maybe let's talk small picture, big picture. How is that for Adam? And then what does that mean for wrestling?
Well, I think, every, big major collegiate football coach always praises wrestling. I know that, especially within the state of Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, Matt Campbell, Nick Saban, some of the all-time greats have praised wrestling to be football players, throughout their high school, being multi-sport athletes. I think for the NFL, Adam Kuhn is, he's a specimen. Like I think, what is he, 6'5", 280, maybe 300 pounds pretty much all the time. So, I think he could transition to tackle pretty well. Some of those guys that play guard and they're, 6'7", 6'8", some of those guys. So I think he'll be fine. But I think the bigger thing is that, you're going to have the entire wrestling community buying Tennessee Titans gear now. You just got a whole bunch of new fans, and everyone's going to be rooting on for them. And, as soon as Adam Kuhn signs, Julio Jones signs. So I don't know if there's a correlation there, but all of a sudden you get one of the best wide receivers in the game because you have a wrestler coming on board. So what it may mean for USA Wrestling is that there's going to be opportunities within the Greco weight chart here to see who will step up for the next Olympic quad. If Adam's going to be going full-time NFL, I don't think he's going to be doing much Greco. So opportunities will arise with, having this guy go on to the NFL.
Yeah, Marco, whether you want to talk about Kuhn, Greco, or NFL, when you heard about this, what'd you think?
Well, I think it's great for him. I know the last big name in wrestling that tried this, he wasn't real successful at it. Brock Lesnar tried out for the Minnesota Vikings a few years ago. He made it through a good chunk of the preseason and then was cut. I think Adam's a little bit different. He's taller. I think his positioning is probably a little bit better with Greco. I would hate to be the defensive person trying to get through him because they may end up on their head just because of the way he positions his body. You're not going to move him around. So I think it's great for him. I think it's great for, USA Wrestling. It's great for Greco. So, I hope he does wonderful things for the NFL because he's done it for college wrestling. He's done it for the Olympic wrestling. He's done it for Greco. I hope he succeeds at the NFL. I don't know why he couldn't.
A couple thoughts for me about Kuhn. I remember, I think I was at junior or cadet duels when he was like a freshman or sophomore. And I'm like, oh my Lord, that guy's going to be good. And I was talking to Joe McFarland about him, and he was like, we can't wait till we're allowed to legally call him. And he was freaky good right away. Bourmet and Bela Glazov and Russell all talk about what a great human being he is, how coachable he is. You guys might know the year, but there was a one-year nationals where him and Mike McMullen had one of just the craziest heavyweight scrambles I've ever seen, like 45 seconds to a minute of just nonstop passing legs and coming out the back. And to me, that was a very tipping point kind of moment that people saw heavyweight wrestling or 285 wrestling as a much more athletic weight class than just two fat guys leaning on each other, kind of how it used to be maybe 20 years ago. I mean, I love football. I think most of us do. I know, Mark, you and I play in a fantasy league together, so we all love watching it. I know you do it too, GT. So, I mean, from an offensive lineman standpoint, those are usually like 4 to 5 second interactions. You're either going forward on a running play or, backing up on a passing play. But he's so good at keeping his feet underneath him and not getting extended and knowing how to use his hands. And the idea of holding the center of the mat or trying to push the guy out or getting him to the zone where they make a mistake seems like a really natural transition. I hope Greco is smart about this and really markets this as, hey, this is a way to make a living. Doing Greco, because Greco needs more popularity. They need more good athletes doing Greco-Roman in America. So, and GT, the point about who takes over now, obviously, I think the guy in line is Colton Schultz. He was at the Olympic trials, and he's a young guy. I mean, he was a freshman in college this year. So that bodes very well for him. It bodes well for Sun-Kissed Kids. But it felt like Kuhn was kind of on a tier. Schultz was on a tier below him. And then there was a bunch of other guys kind of in the next tier. So it'll be interesting to see who steps up, whether it's somebody, one of those guys, or whether it's somebody from the collegiate scene now, like maybe it's a Cassiope kind of guy. He's good at holding ground. I mean, obviously Iowa's not known for Greco, but Iowa's known for putting people on the Olympic teams. And I'm sure they would love to have a guy on the Olympic team or a world team, whether it was tiddlywinks, Greco, or freestyle. So that'll be that's interesting. And, I'm a guy that wrestled Greco, so I love seeing that. Couture was a big Greco guy, so when I talk to him, we talk about that a lot. So hopefully, like Grant said, he'll be able to protect Tannehill for a little bit longer. Julio and Henry and AJ Brown and all those guys will have great seasons. And a couple guys' fantasy stocks just went up too. So for those of us doing our draft earlier, getting ready for them. But congrats to Kuhn, awesome dude. So the number one main subject that I think we have left to talk about today is the delegation the USA is sending to Poland for, and it's the 8th through the 13th. We have the schedule up here first. So 8th and 9th are freestyle, men's freestyle, 5 weights, 57, 70, 79, 86, 97. And then 61, 65, 74, 92, 125. So they've done a pretty good job of splitting up the Olympic weights and the non-Olympic weights. Then the same thing with the women's the next 2 days, followed by Greco the following 2 days. So it'll be pretty easy to follow. I'm assuming this is on Flow. Here's the women. Here's the Greco roster. It's pretty small squad. Max Nowry, Alex Sancho, Alan Vera. The women's squad, Erin Golston, Ronna Heaton, who just won a Pan Am gold, Amy Fernside, Helen Maroulis, that's interesting, Jen Page, and Snowflake, and Diamond Guilford. The men's freestyle, where most of the names are that people know. So super interesting here. And then I'm going to flip this over to Grant. Nathan Tomasello, who's now at the OKRTC, Nick Soriano, at 57, 65, Gianni D, James and Joey McKenna, 70, James Green, who there's a new documentary out about him, and Grant Turner just finished designing new gear for James Green. I'm assuming that was you, GT?
Oh, that's the APS staff. They did a great job with that. So please go check that out.
Yeah, shout out to, I would say that, I wouldn't say if they were with another company, but I would just say that gear is tight, it's sweet. People should take a look at it. The fact that it happens to be Nike is a lot easier for us to talk about. Pantaleo's there as well. 74 from our country is Just Nolf. 86 is Zahid. 92, Jaden, Nate Machiavello. And 125 is Gwizdowski. So, Grant, sort of the depth of these weight classes in terms of who's really good from the foreign countries and, how this tournament plays into maybe the trials process of some of these other countries. So I think Mark and I are interested in you kind of laying some of this out for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at this, the ranking series events that the UWW is basically placed out there, it's very similar to modern day golf or tennis. These are the majors, as they would call them. So like you got the US Open, you got the Masters, you have, whatever it would be like in tennis, the French Open, Wimbledon,
Okay.
the US Open, things of that nature. So the UWW is really trying to focus on some of these bigger time events rather than having all of these small regional ones and basically calling them the ranking series. So, Yasudo, some of the other bigger events, and we're trying to like make it, more of a destination so these federations don't have to go to all these little itty bitty tournaments all over the world. So as you look at this tournament, especially with it being an Olympic year, some of these foreign countries are using the Poland ranking series, one for, their world ranking to then help them out for the Oslo World Championships and separation and getting ranked and being able to have some separation there. So the list of athletes that are basically competing here are kind of the who's who of international wrestling. So just to kind of dive into it a little bit, at 57 kilos, right away, Stipe Miocic from Serbia, a USA guy, now wrestles for Serbia. He's at 57 kilos, 5th in the worlds in 2019. Basically kind of the lone guy there as kind of the standout for 57. There's a few other ones from some additional countries, but he's by far the one that is like, hey, that guy's there. There's two other Olympic qualifiers, one from Algeria, and I believe the other one, I can't think of the country right now, but I'll get that to you here in a second. But there's a few Olympic qualified athletes there. So 3 out of the, whatever it is, however the
16.
Yep. So
yeah.
So pretty standard. So with that being said, a couple of the Olympic qualifiers are going up to 61 kg just for this tournament. Senyayev of Kazakhstan was a world bronze medalist in 2019, and Ravi from India, another bronze medalist from 2019, is up at 61. And then another, the Asian Olympic qualifier first place athlete from Uzbekistan is at 61 kg, so he's another Olympic qualifier. So there's another 3 athletes that are at 61 that will be at the Olympic Games at 57 kilos, just not necessarily wanting to cut the weight. You'll see that later in the, like Haji Aliyev is up at 70 kilos rather than being at.
To just jump in, Grant, real quick, couple questions. So first of all, you said 2 guys were bronze medalists, just so people know, they don't wrestle for 3rd place. Like, when you come through the back, through the repechage, if you went, like Mark and Grant could both take 3rd in the same tournament, they don't wrestle each other. That's how that works. So the second thing is these guys that are moving up, like, so for people that don't know, 57 is the Olympic weight, 61 isn't. The guys that are 57 kilo guys that are going 61, they're not so much worried then about qualifying points for Oslo. This is like their tune-up meet to get ready for the Olympics in a lot of cases. Is that a fair statement, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, it's 100% accurate. And then basically if Senyayev or Ravi or whoever it would be that goes up to 61 kg, they're getting ranking series points at 61 kg. So if they want to drop back down for 57 at Oslo, everything that they did at 61 means nothing. So it's just like you just went and like, hey man, I just beat a NCAA wrestling championship, whatever it is. I beat Spencer Lee. And then you go up to 133, it means nothing for when you're at 133. So you're just basically thrown into that bracket. So it basically makes those countries and athletes really focus on what weight classes they're going to go to for each world championship, because you're going to get additional points based off of you staying within your category. So if you are a 61 kg guy and you want to be separated at 61 kg at the world championships, you might want to go to the ranking series at your weight class so that you can basically get all these points.
What are realistic expectations? It feels like we're kind of taking these 2 weight classes at a time because guys are moving up, which makes sense. So for America, we have no one at 61. What's realistic expectations for Suriano and NATO?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to get an opportunity. I mean, Suriano hasn't wrestled in a while. internationally. So, I mean, I'm assuming that he's ready and raring to go from his positive COVID test at the Olympic trials in Fort Worth. So
Yeah.
I think he's looking forward to competing. I think, NATO has wrestled internationally or wrestled guys from on the international scene before. So I expect them to go there and compete. I don't necessarily know if they're going to come back with medals, but they should go have a pretty good tournament. If all these guys were at the exact same weight class, if they were all at 57, that's pretty deep weight class. There's three world medals right there. That could be very problematic. So, and of course, Gilman, when he went to the World Championships, did not medal. So, this is a little mini World Championship, especially at that weight class from the guys that are at the very top. So,
gotcha. So 65, which is 143. Tell us about who's there.
So one of the big ones is Nurmagomedov from Kazakhstan, world silver medalist at the World Championships in 2019. Lost to Rashidov from Russia. By the way, Kazakhstan had an amazing World Championships in 2019. So a lot of these guys are very highly ranked.
Yes, because they hosted, right?
They hosted.
And they somehow got some great draws like that. Like Rovat spent a lot of time as the color guy when I was doing the play-by-play, talking about how they got a lot of great draws and had a chance to wrestle through on the back. And there's the way the team scores work in international tournaments, there's no bonus points, correct? I mean, It's just like there's so much for first, so much for second. And they go all the way down and figure out like 10th and 12th place. And it's all based on, I guess there is in that sense, because there's good points, how far you advanced. And like if we both lost in the same rounds, then if you had a pin and I didn't, then it matters. But you don't get like 2 points for a pin. But like you said, Kazakhstan had a really good tournament. They had a bunch of guys. It felt like dang near over half their team was in the top 10 from what I remember.
Yeah, I mean, they wrestled really well. Now, once again, would it be that they got really great draws? Of course, they got some good draws. But those guys are pretty dang good too.
Yeah.
So once again, you got to lose to the right guy in order to get pulled back in, and they made it all the way back in, and won their one repechage match to get back. So we'll see. I mean, they got a lot of opportunities to medal in Tokyo, so we'll see how the Kazakh Wrestling Federation does there. But
gotcha.
Should be pretty good.
So go ahead. 65. Sorry.
65. The gentleman that beat Zane at the Pan Ams from Argentina, Olympic qualifier, will be at this tournament. I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Muzachekagev from Hungary. He's the guy that Yanni wrestled at, I believe it's Yasserdo or the Mato Italian ranking series event. World bronze medalist. He'll be at 65, along with Yanni, who has had a great international presence, and then Joey McKenna, of course, I believe junior world silver medalist or U23 world silver medalist. So those guys are pretty gnarly at that weight class.
So if people haven't seen it, that match with Yanni and the guy's name, the Polish wrestler, was insane. Like the Polish wrestler was like 9-0 and almost teched him. And like 45 seconds later, he was crawling back to the center of the mat and ended up getting beat. So I was listening to the guys talk on another podcast. And they're talking about how there's technically no defined injury time in freestyle wrestling. So you'd think some of these guys would just do the whirly bird and take a lunger. So, I mean, that was interesting. Okay, so 70 is James Green and Pantaleo. That's a non-Olympic weight. Do we have any 65s bumping up there? Like you said, Haji Aliyev?
Haji Aliyev. I mean, that's the main. I mean, once again, that guy's been on the international scene for a very, very long time. Also got second at the Euros. So he's an Olympic qualifier at 65 kg. Kind of got hosed at the 2019 World Championships because he had been bouncing back between different weight classes, 61, went up to 65. Now he's up at 70. So like he's bounced around quite a bit with his weight, but I believe his little quad was Rashidov. I think he had to wrestle Rashidov in a controversial match at the World Championships. Ended up losing. Yeah.
Okay. Is he the main guy? Like, can James Green or Pantaleo, can they make a run here if they don't run into him, or is it super loaded?
Well, I mean, I think James Green is, back at 70. He's probably the most formidable one because that's been his weight class for over the past 5-6 years. Haji Aliyev is, a little bit smaller than James, but Alec Pantaleo he put on a clinic at the Pan Am Championship. So I'm excited to see him on the international scene as well.
Yeah.
I don't think he's really gone overseas all that often to wrestle in something like this for a ranking series event. So I think he could have a very, very cool coming out party at 70 kg globally, especially at one of these events.
And just, I guess, to say this, they don't seed these tournaments or really separate them that much. So like Tomasello Soriano, Yanni McKenna, Green Pantaleo, they could all hit each other in the prelims, correct?
Yes.
There's no
they try to at least get you away from your own country, but if they both win, and there's multiple ways that, I don't know, they don't necessarily do it for sure, but they try to.
Okay, that's good. So 74 for us is just Nolf. That's the Olympic weight. That's the Dake Burrows weight. So who else will Nolf bump into here?
This one is this is going to be like a little mini Olympic tournament. This one is stacked. All right, so we have Frank Chamizo, ranked number 2 or second place World Championships. Everybody should know who Frank Chamizo is. If you can't, just go watch anything on YouTube, wherever it is. He's really good. So, world silver medalist there. Rybicki from Poland, world bronze medalist, is at this weight class. Kasyanov from Kazakhstan was in the bronze place match, got 5th at the Worlds. Hussein from Egypt, Olympic qualifier. Gadziev from Azerbaijan, Olympic qualifier. The Iranian was the Asian Games champion for the Olympic qualifier, so another Olympic qualifier from Iran. Yeah, it's crazy how many people are here at this one. Of course, Nolf, and then Sakala Khanov from Slovakia, who was had the best year of wrestling in his career, as of recently. Won the Euro. It wasn't the Olympic Games qualifier, but the regular Euros.
Euros, yeah.
Last was, I believe, in April. Went to try to qualify at the last chance qualifier in, I think it was Sofia, Bulgaria. Literally loses to the guy from Belarus, Kadi Magomedov, in the semis. Misses out on going to the Olympic Games, but that guy is extremely talented. So you'll probably see him make some noise as well. Yeah, wild weight here. So
if Nolf can win 2-3 matches, that actually would be a really good showing for him, depending on who he draws. But it's so deep, and some of these guys will get separated from each other. Nolf's going to end up bumping into somebody pretty good, probably round of 16 at the latest, maybe even the round of 32, correct?
Yeah, Nolf's he's going to have an opportunity to wrestle somebody that's, got a name. And I shouldn't say that, Jason Nolf doesn't have a name.
But internationally, he doesn't.
Yeah, he's still an American, and he's wrestled pretty well, but not to the level of world and Olympic medals. So
sure,
we'll see how Nolf does. But once again, that's an Olympic weight, so you're gonna see a lot of these guys getting tuned up for Tokyo, and there's some heavy hitters at that weight class.
Okay, let's skip 79 just because we're doing good, but I want to talk about the weights for sure that the Americans are at. So Zahid's at 86, which is an Olympic weight, which is the David Taylor weight. So who will he bump into?
Miles Amin from San Marino, Stefan Riekmouth from Switzerland, both world medalists or Olympic Games qualifiers. A guy from Peru, Olympic Game qualifier. And then the Algerian as well as an Olympic Game qualifier. Colombian, or the Colombian is also Olympics game qualifier. So there's some guys that are, top 16 in the world at that weight class. So he's going to have an opportunity to wrestle somebody that's pretty talented.
And people that don't know this, when you look at the UWW world rankings, in most cases, there'll be two guys or two women, from one country ranked in this top 10 at a weight, like Burroughs and Dake is an example, like Jaden and Snyder, I think were ranked there, if they ranked Jaden at 97. So Zahid was a guy that was ranked really high. Like Alex Dieringer was ranked really high behind at 79 when Dake was 1. Ringer was ranked like 4th or 5th, I think, at the time, before he got hurt. So this is a chance for Zahid. I don't know where he's ranked right now, but to move into that upper echelon of guys, even though he took 3rd at the trials, because I don't know if Bo Nickel's going to do another cycle or not. And that would put him, right there as more or less the Olympic alternate kind of guy and a top 10 guy. So 92 is a huge story. You've got Nate. I've never met a wrestling meet I didn't like to wrestle in Jackson. And then, Jaden back down from 97 and what happened at the trials, shrunk his body back down to 92. So I would guess Jaden's the favorite, right? I mean, he won the Worlds here the last time they held this weight class. Who will he or Nate bump into that are potential challengers to that?
Baranowski from Poland is formidable. He's wrestled Jaden a couple of times, and I believe like maybe the quarters. But not a lot of guys jump out at you. There's a couple of the Turks that have entered this tournament, both extremely talented guys. Seen them wrestle a lot, but no guys that I think would cause any issues for Jaden. But Nate and Miles Martin, or Nate, would be able to have a pretty good tournament.
Does Nate have a chance to make the finals if he's away from Jaden? Is he at that level at this weight, or I shouldn't say does he have a chance, because obviously anyone has a chance. What chance would you give him? Sort of like, how would you handicap it?
I mean, I think I would put him at a level where, I mean, he's Pan Am champ now. So, the Pan Am champ going up into a ranking series event, I would put in, an 80% chance to medal at this event, especially at a non-Olympic weight class. So I think Nate can do pretty dang well here.
And I apologize, Mike Machiavello's in this weight too. When I first looked at it, I thought he was at 97, but he's at 92 as well. So that's my mistake for misreading his weight class. No intention of shortchanging him. And he's obviously a guy, had a really good Olympic trials, NCAA champion, and a guy who's been a late bloomer in college. So some of his wrestling still might be ahead of him, So again, my sincere apologies about that to Pat Pop and those guys. No disrespect at all. And then the last one is Gwiz, who it's interesting seeing Gwiz sort of on this team, because he's obviously 125 is an Olympic weight, and he's been that guy for so many years. But he's a guy that's a former world medalist himself several times. Who else is going to be there that he's going to, look to bump into?
So the Egyptian, who is an Olympic Games qualifier, I mean, there's a couple of them. Hamida is wrestling for Egypt now, so he'll be there as well. The Algerian Olympic Game qualifier will be there. The Indian, Sumet, will be there as well, so another Olympic Game qualifier. The Kazakh. What
is he the favorite to win it?
I mean, I don't think there's a lot of favorites. There's a lot of depth here, so probably wrestlers that were probably 8th through 16 in the world. So a lot of these guys have qualified throughout this year in order to get to the Olympic Games, but none of them, I believe. I mean, Gwizdowski is probably the number one guy, in medal count. So I think he's probably the front runner in all of this, but there's a couple guys that he'll have some good matches with for sure.
So one of the interesting things to understand, there's two things, and I think that'll about wrap it up. So Mark, we might have to do recruiting stories next week. But number one is that, like you mentioned, qualifying and getting these points. So like Gwizdowski would have more qualifying points or seeding points, for separation than Gable would have, because Gable just wasn't wrestling overseas at the senior level, correct, Grant?
Yeah, so each one of those points basically starts and stops over every year.
Okay.
So for instance, like for world championships, you're trying to get all these points for separation at worlds.
Okay.
So then as you go through the ranking series events, they'll probably, and I haven't been in those CD meetings on the international side, so I don't exactly know how that works. But yeah, there'll be a formalized draw, but they'll try to separate some of the guys that have previous, medals and all that kind of stuff at some of these events. And I could be completely wrong on that, just because I don't know enough about the international seeding at the ranking series events.
Right.
But the goal is that as you wrestle throughout that entire year, you try to accrue as many points for then separation to make sure that you're not drawn in.
Right. And that the golf analogy is a good one with like the Charles Schwab Cup or whatever that thing's called. I don't know who the sponsor is now. So, but where you're accumulating points, and then it's the top 125 and then the top 90 and top 60 and then the final 30. And then even in that final 30, like if you're first, you're starting with an XYZ stroke lead and all that kind of stuff. So the point of what I was saying with Gable is he's just going to be drawn in, and the Petrashvili and Akgul, who I would guess are the two top ranked or seeded guys, will be separated. For Gable to win it, he's going to have to go through both of them unless they get upset by somebody, because there's no way they're going to be on the same side of the bracket. I think that's kind of what I was trying to make sure people understood. Obviously, we're like 6-7 weeks out from the Olympics, and we're going to go hard on the Olympics. We'll probably do a couple podcasts that week to make sure we don't shortchange Greco or women's, especially with women's, with us having qualified all 6 weights. The other thing that is interesting about this, and GT, I owe you a thank you on this, for 2019 Worlds, you were one of the guys I called to kind of do my homework. And you said that the host country gets to decide the order of the styles, but the default is that the women are in the middle 2 days. And then in this case, and Mark talked about it off the air, Poland, maybe has a stronger team in Greco than freestyle, so they make Greco last. The 2019 Worlds in Kazakhstan, which you talked about, we went on the air from midnight to 10 a.m. for 9 days straight, so that was interesting. My eyes got even smaller than they normally are. No jokes, please. But one of the things that was, they chose to do men's freestyle last, which as somebody, we were trying to be neutral with the other countries, but we were told we were allowed to literally root for the Americans on the air. And the fact that we did well in men's freestyle, that was where Dake won and Jaden won and Snyder took third and Burroughs took third. But to call 2 world championship final matches on the men's freestyle side, and then Mensa Stock won and Gray won, to call those matches was super cool. But the order is not random, just so people understand that those are chosen by the home country, correct?
Yeah, for Worlds. That was the way it was in Budapest, because in Hungary, Greco is king. They could care less about, they do care about freestyle. I shouldn't say that. But Greco is the predominant style within that country. So on Saturday night, the main ticket, the main event, Greco-Roman national finals or world finals. That is what they want to have happen.
Hey, Grant, I got one question because the listeners that are listening, if you wrestle in the Olympics, and none of the guys that we have wrestled in Poland, which is a point for the world trials, it's how you kind of get seeded at the Worlds. But if you place at the Olympics, does that count in your seed at the Worlds?
I would have to suggest that it does. I don't know how much that would be weighted, but you would then, for instance, if you're an Olympic champion at 86 and you decide that you want to go to 79,
not going to
that
count.
has no bearing on your 79 kg point value.
Right.
It's only at the weight class that you're basically trying to compete at Worlds do those points add up.
Okay.
So I think we'll call USA Wrestling and we can get that answer, Mark, but that's a great question, because I would think it's the heaviest one. Just like the golf analogy, GT, that you laid out is a good one, where like the Memorial Open, which happened this last weekend, it counts, but like the US Open, the PGA, the Masters, and the British Open count more in terms of points. Like all tournaments are not created equal, I guess is basically what we're saying. You've already talked about how some of these Yasser Dogu, Cerro Parado, the tournament here in Poland this weekend are sort of the majors. I think the Olympic would be like a super major in terms of then for the World Championships right after that, and not right after that, but like 2 months later in Oslo. So,
and one other thing I wanted to say, and we talked about these guys that are wrestling over at Poland, and we kind of went over Joey McKenna. Joey McKenna won Pan American title also and looked really, really good. And he also placed second at the trials here in the United States. So I think he's going to be somebody that's, really got a shot over here at Poland to do some good things besides Yanni. Obviously, everybody loves Yanni. They love the way he wrestles. But Joey McKenna's really come on in the last 6 months to a year in freestyle. I think he'll be somebody that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably a good way to end it too. So people need to watch. It's, it's one of the good things. It's bad in that it takes a lot of days, but it's good in that they're not running like 8 mats at once. So it's a lot easier to follow the action. All these international tournaments are 2 or 3 mats at a time for the most part. So it makes it a lot easier to not miss things. And then you can always go into your settings and find out which guy's coming up when, or which woman is coming up when. And so that makes it a lot easier to watch those folks. So I think we're just about out of time. GT, thanks for carrying us this week. Besides helping us with the 18 to 34 demographic, which we appreciate. For Mark and Grant, I'm David. We thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and sharing. We'll speak to you all next week.